Welcome to Live.Work.Thrive. I'm Kyla Birmingham, Scary Mommy executive producer, and I will be the moderator for tonight's panel. Money has the power to stir up conflict, stress, and family drama in unthinkable ways. Whether you and your partner have differing views on spending or your extended fam is over-involved in your finances, mixing family and money can be a challenge. For many of us, the past year isn't just bringing up thoughts about financial survival. It has us questioning our values, our relationships, and our plans for the future. In tonight's episode, presented by Charles Schwab, our panel will discuss how to navigate the complexities of our finances and our closest relationships. We will dive into how to get on the same page with your partner on spending and saving, the age-old question of joint versus separate bank accounts, how to handle money drama with extended family, how to avoid the most common financial conflicts with those closest to you. Let's meet our panelists. Tonight, we have with us Amanda Clayman, a financial therapist who specializes in the cognitive, emotional, and behavioral aspects of our financial well-being. She's also the host of the reoccurring financial therapy segment on the Death, Sex, and Money podcast by WNYC Studios. Her work has been featured in outlets such as The Atlantic, The New York Times, The Wall Street Journal, and The Today Show. Thank you so much for being with us tonight, Amanda.
Thanks, Michaela. Glad to be here.
Also with us tonight is Amy Richardson, a certified financial planner, professional with Schwab Intelligent Portfolios Premium, Schwab's hybrid digital advisory service. Amy oversees a team of financial professionals who can provide personalized financial advice based on a client's current goals and future circumstances. Prior to joining Schwab, Amy was a client relationship manager at Brown and Tedstrom, Inc. She has also held roles at Harris Associates, UBS, and Lehman Brothers Holdings, Inc. Amy, it's so glad to have you with us tonight.
Thank you. So happy to be here, and good evening, everyone.
So before we dive into this hot topic, which I can't wait to discuss because it impacts so many of us, I have a few reminders for the audience. The big one is that you can submit your questions in the comments wherever you're watching, and we may feature your question later on in the show, so stick with us. And also join our mailing list so you don't miss any of our upcoming virtual events. Visit scarymommy.com/live-work-thrive to sign up and stay in touch. Let's get into tonight's topic. So Amanda, in your work, you talk about how the way a person thinks about money is connected to their past and their upbringing. What can you do if your partner in life or your business partner or a family member has a totally different approach to spending and saving? Is this always a bad thing?
Well, in terms of what we should do, I would say first we should expect it. We tend to think that what we know is normal and is sort of the rational way that one should approach money. So when we encounter differences, we're often really surprised that somebody could look at the same situation and have a totally different take in terms of what makes sense to them, what makes them feel comfortable. I believe in differences, actually. I think that our differences really make us stronger. For example, like if you have a partner who is more committed to thinking about the future and saving, they often, I will say in my professional experience, it is the norm for those types of people to partner with somebody who tends to have a little bit of a live for today kind of attitude. And these two people will seek each other out and feel a certain sort of harmony between them, because these two perspectives, when they're really in sync and working together and working toward common goals, make sure that life is enjoyed, but that we're still thinking responsibly about where it is that we're trying to go.
Interesting. So we kind of seek out the places that we don't sometimes have in ourselves in a partner. That's interesting. So, Amanda, when you're thinking about this, do you think that's something that you should really kind of just bring out in the open when you're dating? If this is, I feel like this is an important thing that's going to come back to haunt you if you're not on the same page later.
I think that it's tough. Of course, I would say, yes, absolutely. We should all discuss this. But the reality is that, especially when we're in a getting to know you phase of a relationship, we're trying to present our best selves. So we might not want to disclose to our partner that when I'm depressed, I go shopping. Or, I love to scroll through Instagram to distract myself and click on these ads. Like, there are a lot of things that maybe an important way that we self-regulate or that we soothe ourselves when we're feeling down that impact the ways that we think about and behave with money. But because we don't necessarily have insight and understanding about our own behavior, we have a hard time presenting that in any kind of context to a partner. So I think that there's a natural sort of progression of disclosure for those kinds of things. As we progress to more intimate levels of relationship, we sort of let our hair down, right? We let ourselves be known in these different ways. And ideally the ways that none of these are necessarily deal breakers. And I think that part of the work I do with people is to kind of expanding our capacity to understand and work with these differences. So yes, communication, but I think that there are ways that some of us really need a little bit of help along the way.
Gotcha. So you mentioned a gradual evolution. Now, Amy, when this couple, evolves to the point in having kids, money can become a major stressor, especially for a growing family. What things should every couple think about when they get to this stage, the kids
Absolutely.
stage?
I think it's really important for couples to sit down and really protect that time to have that conversation and communicate together, and really take a look at your finances from a budgeting standpoint and a long-term goal perspective. So understanding, how do your finances look today? What does adding a child to the household look like in terms of extra expenditures, right? Is that childcare, for example? And seeing what adjustments might you all need to make in your day-to-day life so that you still feel financially secure and comfortable with expanding and growing your family. That way you really can spend the time and enjoy that experience together, rather than worrying about what's happening in the checking account, or have we reviewed our retirement accounts? Do we know if we're on track? Let us help you with those types of things. That's what a financial planning can do for you. And then you can get back to enjoying those really important milestones in your life.
And so as parents, how do you figure out how to balance, the family trip to Disney versus maybe having an emergency fund in the bank in case of an emergency flood or a medical issue or something like that? How do you, to your point, enjoy life, and, your kids are only young once, take those trips and make those memories, but at the same time, still be able to think about your retirement and college. I mean, how do you balance all of those considerations?
Absolutely. It can seem like a lot when you kind of first sit down to do it, but trust me, once you put the time in, it becomes much more clear, and really it becomes part of your everyday life. So first and foremost, I would say we want to help make sure that we cover our needs, if you will, right? So what are the most important things in our life that we have to do, right? That's pay our mortgage to keep a roof over our head, pay the electricity bill to keep the lights on, and food on the table, whatever that may be. Those are going to be really important that we have to fund first. That emergency savings account is so critically important because it really is there to protect you in case of emergencies, and really, I think, relieve some of the heartache and stress that comes along with those. Now, it doesn't mean the trip to Disney World can't happen, but it is all about planning ahead for it and saying, for example, we want to take that trip to Disney next year. Let's sit down, look at our budget, and maybe for the next 6 months, we're going to have to scale back the money that we spend on entertainment, right? So it's all about healthy trade-offs and understanding, the longer term impact that you can have. And then what I love most is that you can go to Disney World and you can take that family trip and enjoy those memories together and not worry about, well, how are we going to pay for it? You already did the hard part. You already planned. You already were disciplined in saving for it. Now you get to reward yourself and enjoy that time.
Okay, that's great advice. And hopefully we're all going to get back to thinking about trips very soon.
I can't wait.
Me too. Okay, I want to dive into this topic because I feel like it's a bone to pick over and over for the generations. Joint versus separate bank accounts. All right. I want to hear it from the two experts. You can have differing opinions on this. I'm just curious. Let's start with you, Amanda. When a couple either creates a partnership, gets married, starts living together, what do you recommend? Joint or separate, or some combination of the two?
What I like to do is to really explain the pros and cons of how each arrangement will work in your life. So I don't find that there's one particular way that works for every circumstance, but each one sort of works better or worse in different circumstances. So if we think about 1, 2, and 3 pots, like having everything together all in one pot is great. For example, if your incomes are really different, it sort of doesn't leave one person just holding all of the financial stress that would come from that. It does require a high amount of communication though between the partners. So the exposure is like, well, what if somebody goes and takes all the money out of the bank account and I don't have any control over that? 2 pots allows you to have a lot more independence. You don't have to have those conversations, but again, it doesn't work as well when things are unbalanced. And 3 pots is sort of a nice amalgamation of the two. But it's something where like we tend to be familiar with a way and think that that's the right way. Whereas I think if we feel more of a sense of being informed and having ownership over this choice, and remember, this is not a contract that you sign in blood that is going to be the arrangement for the rest of your life. Like a lot of clients who are, I'm Gen X, so I would say I saw this really coming into my practice with millennials, like people had existing financial lives. They weren't necessarily like, we get married and then we open an account in the husband's name and this is all the way that it's supposed to work. Maybe they didn't move from 2 pots to 3 pots or 1 pot until somebody left the workforce or until a baby came. There may have been some precipitating event that necessitated that kind of a transition to a different system.
And Amy, what do you think on this one? Are you in
Yeah,
alignment?
I'm definitely in alignment with Amanda. I think it's a progression, as she said. It's, you don't have to jump all in at one time and choose one. So for so many people, perhaps keeping those separate accounts at the beginning is a nice transition, right? They're used to having their independent financial lives before coming together. So it's just part of the newlywed process, if you will. But she's absolutely right. It takes a lot more communication. That is one of the biggest kind of things that I would caution people to be aware of if they're going to take that route. A joint account makes things a little bit easier, right? It's everything gets into one pot and you pay all the bills from there. It really does simplify the management of your finances. And then there's kind of that third choice is, you know, you've got the joint account, if you will, that really takes care of all the household expenses. And then you each have your separate, if you will, kind of checking or spending accounts. And as long as your main account really is taking care of all of those needs, as I mentioned earlier, and you both have agreed upon, you know, what amount goes into those separate accounts, then you do get some freedom to spend it how you will. And so if it's buying a gift for your spouse and you don't want them to see, that can be a really great way that you can think about using that type of setup. Or you like spending money on different things, that way you can have a little bit more privacy if that's also the right fit for your relationship.
So I want to dig a little deeper into this topic because I feel like on paper, this is a great idea. Communicate, we pay the bills, you do the things, even if you have 3. Now, what about if you have your own separate accounts or if shared? Doesn't really matter. Is there a threshold limit? Let's say a dollar amount, say $500, $1,000, where you need to do a check-in with the other person, even if you have your own account. If your partner over here is going to go buy a new motorcycle or something, I mean, do you recommend agreeing on if you're going to buy something over X dollars, let's talk about it first. Amanda, what do you think?
I think it's helpful to make that decision ahead of time of what that number is going to be. I think a lot of people run into it by noticing that their partner has spent something and going, what did you do? And so it sort of comes out in a situation where tensions are heightened. But I think ideally what works the best is when we think about those kinds of purchases ahead of time. So it's not really like, hey, I'm in the store, is this okay? Like you're not getting permission. Rather, you're thinking about it ahead of time. You're making those decisions together and deciding, hey, this is where our money is going to go. So I think that there's a way that we can sort of think about this in terms of process and how we build a healthy process into the way we're communicating about financial decisions, and who has the power and how that power gets negotiated in these financial decisions. That helps us to avoid sometimes those fights over the credit card bill or those panicked calls from the aisles of Target.
Yeah, Amy, I mean, do you see that as well? I like what you said there, Amanda, about like not asking for permission, because I feel like in this day and age, no one wants to have to ask if they can buy something. But it is a bit of a shocker when you see, oh, that whatever thing you just bought costs a lot more than I would think you would need for a bicycle tire or whatever you think it is. Amy, what do you recommend for that kind of threshold type conversation?
I agree. I think it's really important to sit down and have that honest conversation together. The reality is you're not an I or a me anymore. You are a we. And that comes with a little bit different territory. And so I think, when you're sitting down and looking at your budgets and finances and looking at all of your expenses, having that conversation to say, what do we mutually agree upon is a good threshold that we would check in with each other. And that way there aren't any surprises. And really, I think what this gets at the heart of, and I'm sure Amanda would have a lot to say about this too, is it's avoiding those arguments or those conflicts, right? So if you have a way to strategically, address things like big purchases ahead of time, then you're going to be able to be in a much better place when you come home after, that run to Target or after you get done at the bike shop. You're going to be able to enjoy that purchase without wondering, is my significant other going to be upset with me? And I think that's the really big benefit in the long run, is you get to enjoy those purchases and those items a lot more than you might have been able to if you had to worry about what was going to happen when you came through the front door.
Right.
Michaela, if I could
Yeah.
add to
Sure.
one dynamic that I think is particularly common and commonly problematic is that, let's say that there's a person in the relationship who tends to be more anxious about money. That often evolves into a situation where the other partner takes on more responsibility for kind of procurement duties in the family. So this is the person who's doing more of the shopping, who's paying for kids' activities, who may have more of a sort of day-to-day cash flow responsibility in terms of making sure that the family has what it needs. And then what happens is when these couples are then coming together and looking at the money, the person who's not involved in what it costs to be in this family takes a look at that spending and goes, oh my goodness, this is terrible, this is crazy. And there ends up being a conflict because probably the person who's doing most of the procurement is being careful and responsible and is thinking like, yes, we spent this much money on these activities, but I also am the one who did the research, and other activities could have been this much more expensive, or you don't know how much effort I put into making sure that I'm buying groceries, et cetera, that are on sale. So there's a tremendous amount of labor that goes into procurement that the person who's not doing that job doesn't necessarily see. They only see the spending. And so that often shows up as a sort of, you need to spend less money, you are just trying to control me kind of, it turns into a relationship conflict when really it's something that's happening just in the distribution of responsibilities around financial tasks in this family.
That is a really great point. And I think that also adds another layer of like the mental load of the partner who is the one signing the kids up for camp and getting them new shoes. And like, do you know how much a pair of jeans costs now for a 12-year-old that like wants to have, once they hit a certain age, it's like adult prices, everything costs double, right? So, Amy, what do you recommend for that procurement department of the household, let's call it? Should they be saying, okay, every month we'll just sit down and we'll do a review of what was spent? Or, how do you keep the other partner informed so that they don't look at the bank statement and be like, oh my God, we're poor, what happened here? But you're like, no, we needed to eat and we needed some shoes, right? How do you keep that communication going? Because it's a little laborious to be like inputting everything you spend into an Excel spreadsheet every single month.
Right, absolutely. Well, thankfully, technology has come a long way and helped us. And I don't know if anybody remembers the days of putting a ledger in your checkbook to balance and things like that. But I think the concept of budgeting is not a one-time exercise. It is a constant evolution of everything you just explained, right? It might be kids are growing up and their clothes are more expensive. They might be getting into more, activities and sports and arts maybe that are going to have an impact on your budget. So to really take some time, and it doesn't have to be this big deal, right? Do it over the dinner table, perhaps even involve your children. Hey, everyone, let's talk about this last month. It's great that you're into hockey and you want to play the instrument. Let's talk about how this impacted our budget, where we might need to make a few adjustments. It can be a healthy conversation. So I think creating that psychological safe space to make it an engagement for you and your partner and possibly the whole family makes it feel a lot different too. And it isn't something so laborious, if you will. And it becomes part of, hey, we do the laundry, we check our budget every month, we check our cash flow. I think it can be integrated into your life. It doesn't have to be a separate type experience.
So I like what you said there about technology having come a long way. And, I have a couple credit cards from different, vendors. And at the end of the month, I get like a nice pie chart and it says, oh, you spent this much on food and you spent this much on entertainment, but I got all these other accounts and nobody's giving me the pie chart all together in the same place. And I do not have the time to merge that whole thing. So Amy, what do you recommend if I want pie chart at my fingertips? Where do I go to make this dinner time conversation quick and easy? Because remember, I'm a mom and I got hockey for real and all these things. And I don't want to have a fight. I really don't. And I don't want to have to do math. So who's going to do it for me?
Absolutely. And I think that the easier it is, the more likely you're going to stick with it, right? And do this with your spouse or your other every month. If you got to crunch the numbers and do a spreadsheet, you're going to have to pencil that in your calendar. And exactly, no way, no thank you. So do some research, right? There's a great tool out there called Google, and there's some great services that can help you with that. Everyone has a little bit of a unique way that they go about it. So it's a little bit of your personal preference, but there are tons of resources out there to really take the guesswork out of this and to take, again, making this so labor intensive so that, to your point, you just want to be able to look at a screenshot and say, yep, here's my pulse check of spending for the month. Here's what we need to look at. Here's what we need to, look at for the next month. And I think all of that works in your favor. So definitely use the resources that are out there for you. Let them do all the heavy lifting, and then you can just use it as it fits for your family.
I think it's all about systems, right? Just like
I love it.
Those home edit girls, how they're editing the closet. We got to do the same thing for the bank account. We need systems. Can't be doing that work over and over every single month. There's no time, right? Goodness.
Right.
All right. Speaking of time, it is now time for our Charles Schwab moment. So we asked members of the Scary Mommy community to tell us, how do you and your partner disagree when it comes to money? And here's a comment submitted by I didn't have money, and now that I have it, I spend it the way I want to and have fun. My partner always had money, so he has a more reserved spending habit. We don't disagree, we just differ. I'm working on my issues for sure. So Amanda, is this an example of kind of your upbringing in the case of Marianne here, her background kind of impacting the way she thinks about money as an adult?
Yes, absolutely. Each of us comes into adulthood with our kind of original software, our original programming, if you will, that we receive from our family of origin. Maybe they didn't sort of program us in a really conscious way, but the experiences that we had with money, the messages that we heard, the sort of emotional tenor of money as an experience, these are all things that go into our understanding of how we approach money and how money works in the world. So when you're growing up in a situation of lack or insecurity about your needs and wants being met, it's very natural for us to feel like we need to live for today. If there's money here, I'm going to get what I want, because maybe that person's experience, Marianne's experience, was, if I don't get it while I can, I'm not going to get it because that money's not going to be there, or somebody else in the family is going to get their need met. And I would say probably there's something very there's a wisdom in what she was attracted to in a partner, somebody who has a more measured, more optimistic sort of view in their ability to shape their behavior to create a certain future. But there's also a reason, like she said that she's working on her issues, and I'd be very curious what her partner's relationship is with his own issues, because all of us have issues. It's not fair to say that the spender is always wrong and the saver is always correct. So for him I don't know that it's a him, for the partner to be able to say, this is the way that I think money should work. This is what's important to me in terms of how we use this resource in our lives. And to think about what Marianne also contributes in terms of like maybe bringing more spontaneity, maybe bringing a sense of it's all going to work out, because look, I didn't have a plan for a lot of this, and yet I still have been adaptable and flexible and resilient, and all of these other sorts of qualities that can come with that type of a background or that type of a kind of psychographic. And to look at the sum of the different parts and perspectives as being actually greater and more vibrant and sort of allowing a 360-degree view, if you will, than what in each individual partner brings to the table.
That's such a great way of looking at it. And, you made me think of something that I think sometimes happens in my own life, where I'm like Debbie Downer in the family, like, go brush your teeth, floss. That's too expensive. We can't buy that. Meanwhile, my husband's like, yeah, sure. Fantastic. Let's just, more bikes and let's go out for dinner, blah, blah, blah. I mean, not all the time. He's pretty, most of the time we're on the same page, but usually if there's a ramping it down message, it's coming from me. So I'm like the not fun one.
Yeah.
What do you do, Amy, if you're in a situation where there's one person in the partnership who's always got to be the traffic cop for the spending to kind of like keep everyone grounded? That gets tiring, and you get a bad rep in the house when you're always one, like, no, we got to wait till the sale to buy those shoes. What do you do?
Absolutely. So I think it goes back to our conversation about budgeting, right? And if you feel comfortable in your cash flow and how expenses look, the other person might be a little bit more open to spending and might not be so reserved or have so many concerns about it. So again, it's sitting down, having that conversation, and also being willing to compromise, right? Money is such a very individual experience for each of us. It has a different meaning. So, understanding where your partner comes from is so important, as Amanda just talked about. And then it gives you both the ability to ask each other to, meet more in the middle. And that way you guys are thriving together and living a joyful life versus kind of being on opposite ends of the spectrum, where it's a little more like you said, one person wants to go out, one doesn't. Well, okay, our budget, we can go out once a week as a family, and that becomes exciting and you look forward to it versus, maybe the other side where it's going to be a little bit of a should we, could we, but this way, the answer.
So set the foundation, have a plan. That way, going forward, you kind of all can play within that sandbox and nobody's got to be the bad guy, good guy, or good girl.
Absolutely. I'm a lady with a plan.
Awesome.
You got it all.
So let's talk about if the plan needs to involve the extended family. I love this one because it's getting spicy now. This is happening all over the place. All my friends right now are going through this. Okay. So when, let's say you're in a relationship with someone, but you want to make a major purchase, or you have a goal, but it's going to take some bit of a financial stretch, and you're going to look to, let's say, a relative for support, whether it's buying a house or, another form of investment. What are some things to consider before asking for that support, or for if you're in the position to be giving the support to someone? Because I feel like there's a lot of ways this can go painfully wrong. Amanda, give us a couple tips there on how to tread down the relatives and money path.
Well, it's so tricky because every family has its own unique money culture. So in some cultures, it's perfectly normal to have those sort of generational boundaries blurred, and families help and families support each other, and they do that with money, and it's not a big deal. Sometimes money is a love language in families, and a way to say, like, this is important to you, and so I'm showing up in this way to put dollars behind something that's important to you. So I think we have to sort of look at the symbolic value of what's happening and the relational context of what's happening within different families. Like in my family, for example, there's a tremendous, we're so Midwestern independent, like we will show up to your house with a casserole dish and a hammer to like help you on projects, but like nobody's giving money to anybody else in the family. Whereas my husband's family, that boundary, it's funny, you're not allowed to ask for money, but if you sort of like talk about a money need, then somebody might offer money, which is different again than how another family might deal with it. So I think not identifying what we do as always the right thing or the best way, but sort of trying to appreciate and taking a bit of a like aerial view of how this works in families is an important place to start. I think if you are the one who's being asked for money, that first of all, to think about sort of how that fits in your life financially, first and foremost, like if this is something that you can even afford to do. If think about the ways that could impact your relationship with this person in different circumstances. Like if the agreement is for them to pay you back, think ahead of time about what will happen in the relationship if they're not able to pay you back. And would it make sense then to take some steps like structuring this as a gift? And sort of what does that do to the relationship if you're structuring it as a gift? But to be like, I think both in the sort of like the practical what is happening with the numbers and what makes sense, but also taking a really a very detailed and careful look about what's happening in the relationship around this and how money as a source of power is going to affect the different relationship elements. And finally, to think too of like ways that we can be creative. So instead of like, this person needs money from me, is it right or wrong for me to give it? And then I just give it. Sometimes we can still have boundaries around that. So we may be able to offer a certain degree of help, but then there's a boundary around like, if I'm showing up in this way, here's what I'm worried about in terms of our communication, or, this is the amount that I can afford. It's a one-time thing, or it's this amount per month for a period of time, et cetera. But like to not be afraid to think about the structural details too, that can help that really work well for all the parties that are involved.
So that's a good point, Amy. How, I guess, legit, to use the word that's not very financially,
We can go
sound, but we'll call it like, let's be how papered or how like on the books should you get with a family member who, let's say, wants to borrow money? Should you have a written agreement about this? Should you go to the bank together and sit down and, work out a payment plan? Or, what do you recommend in terms of like how formal this agreement should be? Once you've taken the steps that Amanda recommends in terms of like understanding your own family's culture, because everyone's got different levels of comfort with these different transactions. But then on the kind of transactional side of things, what do you recommend in terms of just protecting yourself and, making sure that, everyone's on the same page with visibility into how this is going to happen and what the expectations are?
Absolutely. I just want to reinforce what Amanda just talked about, though, is so important, right? There's so often our heart wants to help, right? But our brain and our pocketbook might be saying otherwise. And so first and foremost, I think it's really important to think about, who you might be asking for help from, or if you're someone that wants to give help, have you really looked at your own situation to make sure that this doesn't jeopardize your finances? That is so important. There's other alternatives if you're looking perhaps at your employer might have resources that you could use, the community might have additional resources. So I really want to reiterate that that's really important for others not to jeopardize their own financial health and well-being. But to your point, absolutely, I think having some formal plan is really important. There's the word again, plan, right? It's a way to hold each other accountable and be able to also have that conversation when it might get a little bit tough, right? This is the agreement that we agreed to when we set out on this, gift or whatever that may be, or this loan. And so how are you going to build that into your budget? Again, let's go back to the budgeting conversation. Everything goes back to that foundation. And so I think being able to have something really, something that's solid for you to come back to is important, just so you can each have that opportunity to hold each other accountable. But also, I think when you're giving money or loaning it, you have to also weigh the, what happens if you don't get paid back? What does that look like for you? How are you going to emotionally feel about that? How are your finances going to look and feel if that happens? And so sometimes I think planning is looking at the worst case scenario and making sure that if that were to happen, are you still okay? Are you still able to meet all of your financial obligations? And that way you're not creating undue, stress for yourself.
I'd like to just sort of like snap my fingers at Amy's point about the budget. As a way to protect yourself when you're being asked for money, because when your money doesn't have a direction and somebody else is saying, hey, I need this help, it's really hard to assess what is a safe and supportable way that we can be helpful without destabilizing ourselves. So if our money has a direction, then we're able to look at it and say, okay, what would I have to change, or how much do I have? Because I think most givers do want to be generous and helpful and supportive, but most of us do have real reservation or anxiety about, can I do this and still make sure that I'm okay? And how do I do that? And the answer is, your dollars need a direction.
Amanda, that's a really good point. Sorry, we're totally vibing here. We're on the same page. Last thing, and this might help answer your question a little bit more, is there's also alternative ways than outright giving money that you can offer support. And so that was the one piece I wanted to add is, for example, grandparents very much are interested in helping fund grandchildren's education. There's a tax advantage way to do this that also benefits the child and gives your money that, or your grandchild gives your money that direction. You get the tax advantages from that. And then you feel like, I'm doing a good thing and I know that it's going to have the outcome I intended it to, versus I'll just write someone a check, hope that it goes to the purpose that I'm wanting it to. So be really, thoughtful about how you do this and how you structure it. It's not just, writing a check all the time. There's other ways we can do it nowadays.
Grandparents out there, hear that? Give the money directly to the university or the college. You're going to get tax benefits. Heard it right here from Charles Schwab. All right. What about, I've heard of people doing this where you've got money set aside in the will and the parents will say, all right, I'll give you your inheritance before I die. Amy, is this a good idea?
I love this. Again, personal preference, right, Amanda? It's all about your relationship with money and probably how you grew up with it, or maybe didn't grow up with it. A lot of parents nowadays, or family members, might want to see their children or their grandchildren enjoy it while they're still alive and be able to watch them, buy that first house or graduate from college. That for them is really meaningful in terms of the legacy that they want to leave. Again, it's how do you be intentional with it and protect those funds so that they are going to the places that you want them to. And if you're not comfortable, that is okay. There are a lot of people out there that say, I don't really want my kids to know what my wealth is right now. I want them to continue striving for their own independence and working hard in their career, and not maybe thinking that there's a safety net coming down the pike for them. And so again, very personal in how you think about money, and probably a lot about what your children are doing. Are they responsible? Are they, if they're not, and they're irresponsible, it's probably going to weigh heavily on how you think about formulating that. So there's pros and cons to both.
I feel like we could stick on the relatives topic all night, but I'm going to move on because I don't want to dwell on it.
I was like, ready to pounce on that one. Okay, I'll follow.
I feel like we could go down a rabbit hole with strings attached and all sorts of things, and it's just a whole nother show. But we'll have you come back, Amy and Amanda, and we can go to part 2. So I want to talk about back to the couple and the dynamic between the partnership. Because you hear sometimes, in my house, we have departments. Okay. My department includes certain things that I'm good at and I enjoy doing. And there are things that I'd rather not do. And my partner handles that, and it's fine. And we have a system and it's all great. But, in the realm of finances, when one partner comes to the partnership with more of a financial acumen, they're a little more savvy than the other partner, or they're perceived to be. And that person might take the lead on decision making or money management. And that sometimes defaults the other partner into a more passive role. Can that lead to conflict, or kind of just getting too comfortable with playing one of the two roles? Amanda, what do you think?
Oh my gosh, I was going to say, please send that one my way. So yes, is the short answer. Yes, that's problematic but it's not a problematic way to start. It's just probably not where long-term stability, health, and sort of inclusive participation is going to happen. It's not taking advantage of all of the different resources between these two partners that they bring to the table. So oftentimes, yes, the sort of initial process is I'm the one who will take the lead, either because I make more of the money, or I'm the one who wants to have more control over here. And then the other partner sort of shifts into more of a supportive or passive role, as you said. Eventually what often happens is there's either a crisis where there's a problem with that partner not having that information, not being able to participate. There could be a betrayal or even financial infidelity that happens because that other partner has been in a passive and dependent role. There could be sort of a disability or an illness or anything that can happen. So it's a very vulnerable position to be excluding what I think of as human resources in this family. So like I have, when I work with families, 5 pillars of financial health. So how we all know when we're on the same page, working toward the same goal, and what financial health and a healthy process is going to look like. And those 5 pillars are equality, meaning that both partners have equal power in decision making. It's not just who's more anxious or who makes the more money has more of the power. It's inclusive, meaning both partners need to participate. One can't opt out, nor can they be shut out by the other partner. It needs to be transparent, meaning there needs to be access to the information. So even if one partner is taking a lead role in an area, there's still some sort of mechanism that brings them back on the same page, either through some kind of reporting process, or just being able to look into these different accounts and agree upon boundaries. And finally, it needs to be sustainable and flexible, meaning it's not one partner sort of imposing their will on another one and saying, this is the way that money needs to work, and you need to kind of get in line and conform to this, because that's going to end up with some sort of rebellion or someone subverting the system. And the flexibility piece is where a partner petitions for change or where the circumstances change, that we have the ability to come back and alter our process and alter our agreement with each other. And I think when both partners, even if they're totally far apart initially, if they can agree that, yes, this is our commonly held definition of what financial health looks like in our process together, then we can find all kinds of ways to work on communication and how we come up with a concrete ask, et cetera. Like there are a lot of tactics that can go along with that, but those 5 pillars are the strategy for how people can work together with each other when it comes to the role of money in their lives.
So, Amy, I think, Amanda's just raised so many good points here about, if the other partner gets sick and you have no idea where to find the paperwork or how to log in or how much money is where, when thinking about a financial planner, since this is what you do, what would you say to someone who's maybe intimidated from being in that passive role for many years, and they don't know where to start? I mean, they call you and they say, honestly, I don't know the answer to how much do we pay for our mortgage, or, whatever it may be. What would you say to that person who feels intimidated to kind of take that first step to become more financially literate?
Absolutely. And so at Schwab, we have some of our key investing principles. And the very first one is start with a financial plan. And the key to this is that when we do a financial planning engagement, we want both parties to come to that meeting. Now, it doesn't mean you have to, feel like we're going to ask you a bunch of questions, but it's absolutely to get at what you just discussed. We want to make sure that both parties are being brought into that conversation And part of financial planning and going through that exercise with us is about education. It is about learning. So we invite people to come. We're here to help teach you, and you're encouraged to ask questions along the way. That's the only way we're going to move that needle from becoming uncomfortable with that topic maybe of finances and moving along that spectrum to feeling more and more comfortable. I think that's so important just from step one, and then to be part of that ongoing conversation. Doesn't mean it has to be something that you think is thrilling all the time, but at least you know more than when you started. So if something happens, what bills need to be paid, what the expenses for the household look like because you've been talking to your financial planner or just listening in on that conversation. That is so much of what we do in how we help our clients today. And to Amanda's point, I think being able to just have that understanding together of where things are, and so much of what we do is online these days, right? All of our accounts are online. We pay bills online. What if something happened to your partner? Would you know where to go? Would you know who to reach out to? That is what we want to make our clients feel really prepared to handle. And maybe that means coming to us, but at least you know your resources and where to start, because sometimes that's the hardest place. And so we absolutely bring both people into that conversation and want to make sure that we're taking care of both of their needs from an educational standpoint.
That is great. And so, Amy, just to follow up, do you need millions to come in to see a financial planner? I mean, what if someone out there's watching thinking, well, we're just trying to make ends meet here. I want to make a plan. I want to think about the future, but we don't have a ton of money. Is that something that you could still help someone with?
Oh my goodness. I didn't know if I was going to get that question. You just made my evening. I love this question, and it is such a deep passion of mine. It is about financial planning is not about having millions in the bank or feeling like your situation requires it. Financial planning is for everybody because we all have goals. We all have something we're striving for in the short term and most likely for the long term, right? Retirement. And how do you know where to start? If this isn't kind of your area of expertise, not starting because you don't know is not what I want people to say. I want them to say, I don't know where to start, Amy, but I'm wanting you to help me. And I love that at Schwab, we offer that. It is one of our biggest commitments to our clients is that we want to bring financial planning accessibility to the masses because it has such a long-term impact on success and goes with everything we've been talking about. It really helps you feel more secure and confident in your day-to-day life when you have that kind of solid foundation that we've been talking about, and you're able to make decisions and know, hey, I know I have a financial plan. I know I've got someone I can work with to help bounce this, these ideas off of. And that coach is going to keep me on track. But starting early is so key. And I would just encourage everyone to explore it. I promise you, if you've never done it, it will be fun. I say financial planning is fun because it is. It's all about helping you achieve what's most important to you.
And I imagine the earlier you start, the more trust you just build up over the years so that when you may, accumulate more of a savings and you're ready to make, more, substantial purchases or decisions, you've got a relationship now with someone that might have known you and your family for a long time that you can be like, hey, Amy, what do I do? Do I do this or not? Is this a good idea? And then you can, kind of have that confidence level that you're getting the right advice. Is that fair to say?
I love what you just said. And then the last word that you said was the confidence that you have. And that is what we want our clients to have, is that confidence to know that they have a plan, they have a resource, right? There's nothing I think kind of more challenging than wondering, who do I go to? Would this be the right thing for me? But having that confidence as a person and in your own, managing your own finances, it is amazing how empowered people feel just to go out and own every day, whether it's in their career or being present with their family. It just really allows you to focus on the things that are most important. Always checking in on your finances, right? It's still an active engagement. But when you can kind of really be focused and prioritize the things that are most important to you, you really do feel free and empowered to live the life that you love.
That is a great point. So we're almost out of time, but we're going to take a few questions from our live audience right now. Okay. So, Amanda, I'm going to give this one to you. What about stay-at-home moms? How do we share expenses fairly? Talk to us about the actual work of motherhood, which is work, which is a lot of work, a lot of hours, a lot of toiling. How do those
A
stay-at-home
lot of
moms,
procurement.
yes, how do those stay-at-home moms feel empowered, feel valued, feel recognized, and feel like an active participant in the finances of the home?
So I do think the most important place to start here is making sure that you have the best sort of structural system. And that goes back to the how many accounts and what accounts. And if one partner is staying home, then probably the best one for you is the one pot system, because it doesn't really make sense to have three pots or two pots if there's not income coming into those. So making sure that you're in a place where you're not penalizing the person who doesn't necessarily have an income or as great of an income as their other partner. I think having a sense of again, laying out the cost of what it takes to be in this family and what are the operating costs of this family, because you are essentially like the COO and the CFO in many cases when you are a stay-at-home parent. You're making sure that the needs of the family are met. But it's also, this is the place where it's helpful to have the different perspectives of two partners together and to say, like, here are our resources, let's make decisions together about where those resources are going to go. But frankly, inside of these boundaries, you don't bug me about, like, maybe groceries are higher this month, or it's time for back to school shopping, and that's going to be sort of a seasonal change in our expenses. Like, maybe part of your role as a stay-at-home parent is that you need to educate and inform your partner who doesn't have the same sort of day-to-day familiarity with the costs of running this family, and to have some ownership and notice, maybe it's kind of like a red flag if you feel yourself slipping into a defensive position, if you feel like the role that you have as a stay-at-home parent is a thankless one, where your contribution is minimized and criticized by your partner, then that to me really suggests a systemic issue where the partner who's disengaged from the day-to-day financial reality is sort of using you or putting you in a position where they are projecting their unresolved anxiety and control issues around money. And so what may be presenting is like, wow, this is really not working and we're fighting a lot about this, is one of those places where, as a financial therapist, I really see as like money often is pointing us toward the places where we need to grow as people or in a relationship. So it's sort of pointing you towards something that looks on the surface like a financial issue, but really there's a relationship issue or a personal issue with your partner that's happening underneath that.
It stems, Amanda. It all stems deep down. That's what I say to my girlfriend. I'm like, that stems. Yep. Nope. That's not about the money.
Stemming
That's
on
about
me. I don't like it. I don't appreciate it.
deep. All right. Another question for you, Amy. Let's see. Okay. My parents, my kids' grandparents spoil my children with money, which makes it very hard for me to teach them the value of money. I've tried speaking to them, but they don't listen. How do I get these grandparents on board? What do you think, Amy? Do we send them to your office? Amanda, help us out. I think we may have lost Amy's connection there for a second.
Yes. This is a tricky boundary issue for sure, because grandparents may have been waiting their whole lives for the opportunity to spoil people. But I think when we come from a place of not, here's what you're doing that's wrong, but rather, here's what's really important to us that we're trying to do right as a family, and can we all strategize together and collaborate together on some ways that you can help us do this? Like, maybe the grandparents create the sort of carrot, if you will, but the children get to work, the grandchildren are working towards something that is a reward that the grandparents are giving. Like, I think it's an opportunity to bring the generations together, but it starts with some maybe tough boundary conversations first.
Grandparents. Oh, yikes. That's a whole nother show on just grandparents. For sure. So Amy, how about this one for you? My husband and I have separate bank accounts and he makes a lot more than I do. I have little say as to what he spends on. How do I get more on equal ground if he's not willing to do a joint account? What do you recommend for this couple when they walk into your office and they say, Amy, financial plan us out of this dilemma?
Well, that's an interesting one. And so first I might recommend that they sit down and look at their monthly expenses, and perhaps instead of saying, let's share things 50-50, right? And we'll split everything as it comes in. If he's the higher wage earner, he takes on the more expensive, pieces of that budget, right? Maybe it's the mortgage, the car payments, saving for the education, and perhaps she takes on more of the utility bills, right? You don't want to put your spouse in a compromising situation where, it really straps them. Everyone is working, everyone is contributing to the household. This really is a joint effort. And it's so important to also bring that into your relationship and make sure that you're really being equitable. And equitable isn't 50-50 all the time. It is really saying we're both contributing to the household. You earn more proportionately. That might be better for you to take care of.
Right. So we're thinking about fairness, not necessarily equitable is, what we're trying to achieve here. So Amy, here's one more for you. I take care of the family finances. My husband doesn't really worry about money, leaving me to take on that burden. How do I get him to worry a little?
I like this one because it all goes back to that very first conversation that we have with our clients was about having a financial plan, right? If he doesn't know what goes into saving for retirement or saving for college education, then it's really hard for someone to get interested. But once they see, how hard someone has to work to really sock away those savings and just to be disciplined, and it's a lot easier to spend money than to save money. It feels better to spend, right? And so if you can help someone see all of the hard work that goes into that and creating a financial plan, doesn't mean that they have to be, interested in it all the time, but having that as your kind of your guidepost and bringing the conversation back to that really presents a level playing field to say, okay, this is what's best for our family, and this is how we need to make decisions and spend money together.
Level playing field. I think that's something that we can all think about when we're making these decisions, right? Well, unfortunately, we are almost out of time. That hour just flew by, and I feel like we could do a whole nother part 2 on a lot of these topics because there's so much here that affects so many of us out there watching. I want to let everyone know that our next live event will be on June 8th, and you won't want to miss it. So register now at scarymommy.com/live.work.thrive. And before we go, I want to say a big thank you to the production team who puts on this live show. Well, I get to sit here and have these fun, informative conversations with smart women like Amy and Amanda. There's a whole team of tech producers and researchers and editors and graphic and motion designers behind the scenes working so hard to make this show happen. And they don't get a lot of credit. So I just want to give the entire team a shout out because today we found out that we won 2 big media awards for Best Virtual Series. So yay team. Thank you so much to everyone who works on this show. I couldn't ask for a better team of people to work through a global pandemic with than all of you. It's been amazing. So, and thank you to both of you for being such excellent panelists tonight. Amy Richardson, she's our certified financial planner, professional with Schwab Intelligent Portfolios Premium. Amy, you got to shorten this title, girl. It's a mouthful. All right. Schwab's hybrid digital advisory service. Visit Charles Schwab if you would like to connect with Amy or one of her colleagues who can help you with a lot of the things that we've been talking about tonight. And Amanda Clayman, you can find her on the Death, Sex, and Money Financial Therapy podcast by WNYC. She also does one-on-one consultations if you're struggling or you just want to learn more and educate yourself on some of the things that we've been discussing here tonight. I think both of these 2 ladies have so many, great frameworks for expertise that I could certainly love to have a coffee with both of you. All right. So have a great night, Scary Mommies. The past year has been rough, but maybe it's a chance for us to take a closer look at our relationships, our money, and ourselves so that we can take hold of what we need to live, work, and thrive. Good night, everyone.